Hello, everyone. Peace be with you. My talk today is a replay of a homily that I gave on Saturday of the third week of Lent. And that Saturday, I did not preach on the readings of the day, which is customary. Instead, there was something that was concerning me and is still concerning me, and that is when I look around, I see more and more people consumed with what I would call irrational fear. Now, there is fear that is healthy, and there is fear that is irrational. People are fearful because of the virus, and they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know where we're going from here. People are fearful because of the financial markets and so forth. They're fearful about what's happening with their loved ones and so forth. But a normal fear is fine. Fear that keeps us from walking out into the street in front of a car, or fear that keeps us from driving too fast. This kind of fear helps us to respond to the situation. But the irrational fear that's gripping a lot of people is an irrational fear that's actually taking away our life. It takes away our freedom. It's a reaction rather than a response. I see people who are glued to 24-hour news channels, and I mean glued to it all day, glued to their social media accounts, read the paper over and over, looking for information, okay? And I think a lot of this not only leads to information overload, but causes us to react irrationally instead of having a solid plan of what we're going to do and responding in the proper way. But think about this. How many times have you read in Scripture, do not be afraid, do not worry? Isaiah, the prophet of the Old Testament, says, to those who are frightened, be strong, fear not, here is your God. We're told over and over again, be not afraid. I think when we experience fear, especially a gripping, irrational fear, it implies that we're coming in contact with something that is not under our control. And it's an exaggerated sense of that. And this is true. The problem is that this kind of irrational fear communicates to us that God is not in control. Prophet Isaiah wanted us to know that God is real, that God is with us, and that God is in control. Remember when the angel Gabriel came to Mary, turned her life upside down. Was she afraid? She might have been. The angel says, don't be afraid, Mary. Okay? Don't be afraid. Whenever Jesus, after his resurrection, came and appeared to his disciples, the first thing he said, don't be afraid. When the angels appeared to the shepherds to announce Christ's birth, what do you think those poor shepherds felt? The angel said, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. How do those kind of announcements stack up to what we're experiencing now? And I gather that those people were much more inclined to be afraid. Irrational fear is the result of a lack of faith, or it's a result of our inability to rely on the faith that we have. Think of Jesus in the boat with his disciples on the Sea of Galilee. The waves are rocking the boats back and forth, and these experienced fishermen are scared to death. What's Jesus doing? He's asleep in the boat, getting some rest. So finally the disciples wake him up and they say, Lord, save us. What's the first thing Jesus says? Oh, you have little faith. You have little faith. He then calms the sea, goes back to sleep. Our faith doesn't deny fear as a reality any more than Jesus denied fear when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. In Jesus' agony in the garden, we see a progression in Jesus that goes from fear to peace of mind. Think of this. When Jesus first was in the garden, he was afraid. He knew his passion was ahead of him. He asked his friends, please come and stay with me a little while. They went off and fell asleep. He was alone. Scripture tells us that he sweat drops of blood. Okay? Let me tell you, that is afraid. So we know that Jesus experienced fear. He says to his Father, let this cup pass away from me. But then we see a change. He says, if it be your will, then your will be done and not mine. At that point, his faith in his Father took over. He relied on it, and he was no longer afraid. When he went out and met the mob that came with torches to take him away, he wasn't afraid. When Judas kissed him on the cheek, he says, what are you doing? You betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? Jesus sat in front of the high priest. Sometimes he chose not to say anything, just to look back at him. And the high priest said, are you a king? He said, you're the one that says it. These are not the words of a man who was afraid anymore. So you can see this transition from fear to complete confidence. And the confidence is caused by faith and by Jesus' trusting God. Now, there is a healthy response to this outbreak that we're experiencing. And so take sensible precautions. Have a smart strategy of how you're going to gather information to help you make decisions. And that doesn't include 24-hour binging on the news channels. Living in fear is not healthy. And I'll tell you this, if you're living your life in fear and you're waking up in the middle of the night, then this fear is taking your life away from you. And that's why irrational fear is not healthy. So take care of yourself. It's a good time to get some exercise. It's a good time to strengthen your prayer life. You have all of this extra time. Why not use it so that you come out of this better off than you were? Take care of yourself physically and emotionally and spiritually. And do something besides watching the news or hanging on social media all day long. Above all, keep your faith strong and pray. Put your trust in the God that loves you. God that knows what you need and will continue to care for you. And that's my message for today. Oh, and remember to wash your hands.